Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and a good day. I am Dr. Fitri Fahmi from Department of Community Medicine USM, and today I will be discussing about intermittent fasting, useful or harmful. In this video, I will firstly introduce intermittent fasting or IF, the common method of doing IF, and the physiology behind intermittent fasting. Secondly, I will discuss the evidence for and against intermittent fasting and discuss the benefits and potential risks of intermittent fasting, and finally concluding on its feasibility and effectiveness. What is intermittent fasting? It is defined as dietary plans that cycle between periods of restricted eating and regular food intake. Recently, there is a growing trend of using intermittent fasting as a weight loss and health optimization method. Google searches for intermittent fasting rose 10 times between 2015 and 2023, and it is seen as a lifestyle rather than a diet, which resonates with individuals seeking sustainable and flexible weight management options. What are the common methods of IF? There are three main methods of IF, and with variability of implementation in between. Number one, there is alternate day fasting, in which the individual alternates between unrestricted eating days and low-calorie fasting days. For example, complete ADF or modified ADF, where the person consumes low calories on not fasting days. Secondly, there is time-restricted eating or feeding, in which the individuals restrict food intake to a specific time frame each day. For example, the 16A diet, where the 16 hours of fasting followed by 8 hours of eating window. Thirdly, there is periodic fasting, in which the individual fasts on certain days while allowing normal eating on others. Example, the 36-hour fasting or the monk fast. Why is intermittent fasting becoming more and more popular? One part of it is because of the obesity pandemic occurring all over the world. Research study shows that the prevalence of obesity has nearly tripled since 1975, with current prevalence indicating that 39% of adults worldwide are overweight and 30% are obese, according to the WHO 2034. It means that one in 10 people or 1 in 10 person in the world are obese. Among Southeast Asian countries, Malaysia records the highest prevalence of obesity at approximately 20% in the 2019 National Health and Mobility Survey. And the rise of popular diets that often promise quick and dramatic results, appealing to individuals' desires for rapid weight loss, despite the lack of scientific support for long-term effectiveness. Due to promised health benefits, practicality, and minimal side effects, intermittent fasting are becoming more and more popular. Let us hear from some of the people who has implemented intermittent fasting on why they are doing or why they did intermittent fasting. Let's watch the video.
Dah buat IF ni sejak 2015, belajar ilmu-ilmu kesihatan, belajar tentang IF ni, baru saya rasa senang. Dah biasa dah buat macam tu. Untuk buat IF ni mudah bagi saya. Teruskan maknanya buat sehinggalah ke hari ini. Lepas tu dengan buat puasa sunat Isnin Khamis, mudah untuk saya buat sebab dah biasa dah makan tu sekali pada waktu malam tu dah tak ada makan lagi dah. Diet kalori susah lah sebab nak kena kira kalori lah, ada benda yang boleh makan, benda yang tak boleh makan. Bila kata buat IF ni, waktu makan kita tu sangat pendek. Waktu puasa tu yang panjang, as long as kita bersederhana dalam portion makanan kita. Kenapa IF ni mudah? Sebab kita tidur tu kita dah dikira yang kita dalam fasa berpuasa. Kita dah tidur pukul 9 malam ke, kita dah start puasa dah. Kalau maknanya last meal pun pukul 9, sampai besok pagi tu kalau kata sampai pukul 7 baru kita dah puasa dah, almost maknanya 10 jam macam tu. Last meal kita pukul 7 malam, dan sampai ke esok pagi tu kita tak makan, pukul 7 pagi besok baru kita buat sarapan, kita dah pun puasa selama 12 jam.
Ini saya buat sekitar 3 tahun. Okey, dari jam 8 malam sehingga 12 tengah hari. Okey. Berbanding cara lain, IF ni bagi saya cukup mudah, mekanisme mudah, dia punya rutin mudah. 8 malam sehingga 12 tengah hari kita berhenti makan, minum air masak saja. Jadi yang tu kita, bagi saya lah, IF ni tidak membebankan kita lah. Dari segi keuangan pula, kita jimat lah sarapan pagi tak perlu lah.
From the video, we can see that IF are more preferred than any other methods because number one, it's relatively simpler. There's no need for calorie counting. Secondly, it's flexible. They can tailor the methods to the lifestyle of the one who practices it. And thirdly, it's adaptable to typical human activities, including work, sleep, and eat. And finally, fasting practices itself are rooted in many religions in the world. So it is easier for people to integrate with existing religious and cultural practices. Therefore, there is a need to review the evidence because there is a lack of consistent evidence on its safety and effectiveness in order for us to evaluate the benefits and risks of intermittent fasting and suggest areas for further study. Before we go on with the evidence for and against IF, it is critical for us to understand the physiology of fasting, in particular the concept of metabolic switching that is very important in intermittent fasting. This diagram by Stockman et al. In 2018 is called the fat-fast cycle, which shows the process that the human body goes through during the process of eating and fasting. The fat-fast cycle has 4 stages, namely the fat state, the post-absorptive state, the fasting state, and the starvation or long-term fasting state. After food consumption in the fat state, glucose is the primary energy source for most tissues during the day. After meals, glucose is utilized for energy, and fat is stored as triglyceride in the adipose tissues. And during prolonged periods of fasting, triglyceride from adipose tissue are converted to fatty acids and glycerol, which are subsequently metabolized for energy. And the liver converts fatty acids to ketone bodies, which during fasting become a major source of energy for many tissues, especially brain. The fat state and the post-absorptive state are the only times relevant to normal eating routines. In the intermittent fasting regimen, an individual often goes through the fat, post-absorptive, and fasting state. The onset of metabolic switching is the point of negative energy balance during the fasting state, at which liver glycogen stores are depleted and fatty acids are metabolized. This typically occurs beyond 12 hours after the cessation of food intake. The metabolic switching from utilizing glucose to fatty acid-derived ketones represent a shifting metabolism from lipid cholesterol synthesis and fat storage to the mobilization of fat through fatty oxidation and fatty acid-derived ketones, therefore preserving both muscle mass and function. Let us take a look at these 3 diagrams showing diagram A, the person with the typical eating patterns of 3 meals and snacks in between. B, person doing alternate day fasting. C, the person is doing time-restricted feeding. For example, 18 hours of fasting every day. In diagram A, the metabolic switch did not flip at all, meaning there is no process of converting adipose tissue to fatty acids and ketones at all during the day. In diagram B, there is metabolic switching on several days, and C, the switching occurs every day. There is a switch of glucose metabolism to ketogenesis. So you must be asking, why is the need for metabolic switching? Studies have shown that metabolic switching confers several benefits to the human body. It induces signaling pathways which inhibit multiple anabolic pathways and stimulate catabolic reactions autophagy, thereby eliminating damaged proteins and organelles and subsequently improving mitochondrial function. Secondly, it also promotes fat mobilization and oxidation. And thirdly, it preserves muscle mass during fasting by utilizing fatty acid-derived ketones as an efficient energy source. Which leads us to the next section on what are the evidence for the benefits of intermittent fasting. Firstly, intermittent fasting has been shown to achieve weight loss and modify body composition, which is the main aim of this practice. A systematic review by Walton et al. In 2020 shows that in all 27 trials, IF resulted in weight loss ranging from 0.8% to 13.0% of baseline body weight. Kotaski et al. And Vasim et al. Suggested that IF targets visceral fat, a type of fat linked to serious health issues like heart disease. And unlike continuous calorie restriction diets, IF often helps to preserve lean muscle mass, particularly when combined with exercise. However, the limitation to the studies are: number one, there are large variabilities in study design and IF protocol use in the studies. Secondly, the sample sizes in most of the study are small. The biggest study only had 244 participants. Thirdly, most of the study are also short-term study, and also high dropout rates and difficulty maintaining long fasting periods suggest that IF may not be suitable for everyone. Freire et al. Has shown that people with low body fat may see diminished returns from intermittent fasting. And one important thing to note is that in all the cooperative studies in the systematic review, intermittent fasting and calorie restriction results are mostly similar, and IF is not superior to caloric restriction. Secondly, studies also suggest that intermittent fasting lead to improvement in metabolic parameters, which are glycemic control, lipid profile, and blood pressure. In terms of glycemic control, intermittent fasting improves insulin sensitivity and lowers fasting glucose levels by increasing glucose uptake and depleting glycogen stores in the liver. These benefits are less pronounced in people with normal glucose levels, and those with diabetes must carefully monitor blood sugar to avoid hypoglycemia. In terms of lipid profile, studies have shown that intermittent fasting lowers LDL cholesterol and triglycerides while slightly boosting HDL cholesterol. However, the results can vary depending on what people eat during the non-fasting periods. Diets high in unhealthy fats may reduce these benefits. In terms of the blood pressure, moderate reductions in blood pressure have been observed in IF participants. However, improvements are often tied to weight loss rather than IF itself, and changes in eating patterns can affect those on blood pressure medication. Apart from that, another IF benefits were also suggested to improve neurological condition. It appears to protect brain health by promoting processes like autophagy, which clears damaged cells, and reducing oxidative stress. These effects may help slow age-related cognitive decline. Irritability and reduced focus during fasting periods may counteract these benefits for some individuals. And also, evidence in humans are still limited, with much of the research based on animal studies. Finally, studies have shown that intermittent fasting confers cardiovascular benefits. Particle et al. In 2021 suggested that IF improves cardiac biomarkers. It decreases resting heart rate, circulating levels of glucose, insulin, and homocysteine, all of which are favorable with regards to the risk of cardiovascular disease. However, more studies are needed to determine if these effects persist in the long term. Now we're going to talk about the potential harms of IF based on literature. Number one, there's a potential of nutritional deficiencies. Unsupervised intermittent fasting can lead to deficiencies in important nutrients like calcium, iron, and vitamin D if not properly implemented. This risk is particularly concerning for people with pre-existing conditions, elderly, or people on restrictive diets. Secondly, for people with diabetes or metabolic disorders, they face a risk of hypoglycemia because there is a heightened risk of low blood sugar during fasting period. And this highlights the importance of medical supervision for these individuals. Thirdly, there's also some concern on IF leading to adverse psychological and mental health effects. The restrictive nature of intermittent fasting can also contribute to disordered eating patterns or exacerbate existing eating disorders. And there's a study done in Spain in which there's associated. This study has shown that the intermittent fasting are associated with various eating disorder behaviors, including overeating, binge eating, and compulsive exercise, particularly in women and transgender individuals. And finally, another potential harms of IF is hormonal disruption. Studies have shown that IF may disrupt hormonal circadian rhythms, affecting hormones like insulin, thyroid hormones, and glucocorticoids. It can lead to issues such as muscle loss, ketosis, and electrolyte imbalances. Therefore, you can see that some healthcare practitioners advocate that individuals with thyroid therapy may need dose adjustment if they are to embark on this diet. Now, after we have discussed on the benefits and potential harms, how do we weigh all the evidence? While many studies support intermittent fasting benefits, differences in study design and participant characteristics make it hard to compare results and reach a conclusion. Most research are carried out in a short-term period, leaving questions about its long-term effectiveness unanswered. And further research should be done. Further research that will be carried out after this should aim to standardize the methods and explore underlying mechanisms. Talking about the efficacy of intermittent fasting, studies have shown that outcomes vary widely depending on age, gender, and baseline health. There is a need for tailored and personalized approach, and also caution should be exercised, especially for high-risk populations such as pregnant and lactating women, individuals with eating disorders, adolescents, underweight individuals, and older adults. Secondly, in terms of adherence, due to long period of fasting, there could be an issue of decreasing adherence and increasing dropout rates. Therefore, support system and culturally sensitive adaptations can improve the adherence to this diet. And thirdly, as we have mentioned before, the result of weight loss in IF is similar to the result in weight loss in caloric restriction diet. So while IF is comparable to caloric restriction in many metrics, the distinct pathways of each approach warranted further study. Therefore, personalized dietary plans could optimize the outcomes for these patients. What about in the Malaysian state setting? So the Malaysian Ministry of Health has published a document called Clinical Practice Guidelines for Management of Obesity. So under the lifestyle modification topic, intermittent fasting is listed as one of the ways to achieve weight loss. However, it concluded that the effectiveness cannot be determined as conflicting results has emerged from studies. However, it remains one of the viable options for people to lose weight and reduce obesity. My final thoughts on the issue of intermittent fasting is that intermittent fasting is a promising tool to combat obesity pandemic. More and more studies tend to reveal the benefits of IF despite the limitations. However, some high-risk populations might not be suggested for intermittent fasting or need medical opinion if they are to proceed. And for me, the strength of IF should not be quantified just on the physiological parameters, but on its practicality and adaptability to lifestyle and religion, especially in Malaysia. Therefore, the strength of intermittent fasting or the advantage of intermittent fasting lies on its adaptability to lifestyle, culture, and religion. Therefore, it will be easier for people to integrate into existing religious, cultural, and social practices. For example, some people took advantage of the compulsory Ramadan fasting to implement the concept of intermittent fasting. With that, I think that's all from me. Thank you very much for listening and see you again. Assalamualaikum and good day.